Hello and welcome to Pluribus Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, I know what a lot of you may be thinking, and yes, this is going to be a continuation of something that I've talked about a little bit before, but you should be hopeful on one thing. I've made a vow that after this episode, this particular topic will no longer be exiting my mouth. This will be the last time that I talk about this particular subject. And when I say last time, I'm trying 100% to make sure this is literally the last time. As in, if anybody brings up this, I'll just repeat, I'll just send this video and then just be gone. I won't try to rehash any of the arguments that I've made in this video, and I'm not going to let any future information deter what I say in this video. So let's just get into it. Before that, though, let's get right into the news. So the first news story is the thing. When I first saw this news story, my jaw literally dropped, because if this is true, this is one of the biggest news stories that I can think of. But from what I've read, it seems that there's like half-truth so far. So this story comes from El Salvador. If you don't remember, El Salvador is currently being run by a quote-unquote dictator by the name of Nayib Bukele. And Bukele has made the very interesting remark of trying to run for the presidency again, even though in El Salvador the rule was that you could only run for one term. But he decided that he was going to change the rules so that he could run for another term. And he's been steadily making his country into basically a military dictatorship, but nobody seems to be noticing. He announced this huge security bill, which he did. He called the military to his chamber to pass the bill, and they surrounded the legislative chamber while they were going to vote on this bill as a way to threaten the people within the chamber. And under these new laws, many people in El Salvador have gone missing and have not reappeared in months. As I said, Bukele is strengthening his own political power, even though he's claiming to be some sort of like a libertarian type candidate. He's literally called himself a dictator many times on social media, and despite all of this, Bukele is massively popular within his country, to the point where neither of the two main political parties have any chance of beating him. But recent things have shown that there is a chance. And the idea is that the long-standing left-wing party, the FMLN, and the right-wing party, Arena, are proposing the idea of a compromise candidacy to take down Nayib Bukele in 2024. And this seems to be the only way they can beat Nayib Bukele. But from what I have read, this information was either leaked early on, or this is a fake story, because both the FMLN and Arena have claimed to be not joining this coalition. In fact, there are actually more parties that are supposed to be in the coalition as well. But those two have stated that they are not going to join a coalition. They've repeatedly said this many times, but many people are saying that it's just a matter of time, and in fact, this might just be them trying to save face, still trying to maintain that there is some sort of independence. Like, maybe they didn't want to reveal that this was coming out this early. And, I mean, I'm just going to be 100% honest. They're really, like, the reason why it's so surprising is because the fact that these two radically opposed political parties would join in a coalition with each other is surprising. But the fact of the matter is, if they did do it, I really would only support it if an FMLN candidate were on the top. But the fact of the matter is, they're in a position where it's like there is literally no other option. Almost looking like the United States presidential election now that I think about it. But anyways, let's move on to the next story, because there isn't much else to say thus far, because that story is either true or not true, but either way, it is very shocking. Speaking of things that are quote-unquote shocking, Tom Carper of Delaware has announced that he will not be running for a fifth term. And while originally people were enthusiastic 100% about this race, thinking there's a chance that we could actually run and win this race, then immediately when he was announcing that he would not run for another term, he made a bombshell revelation that basically made people go, okay, this race is not going to be doing so hot. So what happened is that when Tom Carper announced that he would not be running for another term, he very clearly and bluntly endorsed the current representative of Delaware, Lisa Blunt Rochester, to be the nominee. But what that does mean is that we might be seeing an open house seat, and currently we have some people that have been floated. Like, for example, I'll just say this. There's been a lot of talk on left-wing Twitter about 3 potential candidates. First, we have Jess Scareen. She ran in one of the Delaware Senate seats prior. She didn't run for this one. She ran for a different one, like the other one that was up for election at that time. The one, I think it was 2020. Yeah, I think it was 2020. Maybe it was 2020? Probably it was. But the other one that many people have been pointing out is Carrie Evelyn Harris, who is a state representative currently, but she did a run for the seat, like this specific seat in 2018, against Tom Carper. And many people have been saying that she might not run because she just got elected as state representative, so it's very unlikely that she would run. But one of the biggest names that have been floated is Sarah McBride, and the reason why she's been floated around is because she is transgender. And she is apparently a progressive, at least from what I've seen from some people, but I don't know. We've heard some people be called progressives that are just really not, and we'll get to that in the next story. But if that means we get transgender representatives, I'm all for it. We currently have not gotten an openly transgender representative in the U.S. Congress thus far, and I would be very interested if it's a good representative, then I'm all for it to see how it is, especially in these trying times, but we'll have to wait and see in that regard. But speaking of things we don't have to wait and see about, the House has just voted to repeal Biden's student debt relief plan. The House on Wednesday passed Republican-led legislation to overturn President Biden's student debt relief program and nullify the freeze on federal student loan payments and interest. It passed the House 218 to 203, and it's going to the Senate, where it's going to... Actually, apparently, we don't necessarily know how it's going to go in the Senate. And this all comes in the whole debacle regarding the debt ceiling, which Republicans have openly stated they are trying to use as a way to tank Joe Biden's chances in 2024. The only reason why I'm talking about this story in particular is... this is the thing. I am not, surprised that this failed, and I'm not even surprised that Democrats voted against it. The one thing that I am surprised about is that apparently this thing is coming of a rebuke of a thing that is currently happening that apparently, let me explain. It was basically a party line vote. The only flips are Marie Gluesenkamp Perez of Washington and Jared Golden of Maine voting for the resolution. And the reason why their votes are interesting, well, actually they're not interesting. Like, Golden was not surprising, and Gluesenkamp was technically not surprising. But what was surprising was this. Apparently, and I just learned this not long ago, and especially this one thing will be very interesting. Gluesenkamp, Jared Golden, and Mary Peltola have been announced. I don't know if this was something that just happened or if this is something that has happened for a bit and we just haven't said anything. But those 3 have been announced to be the new leaders of the Blue Dog Coalition. Now, you might be wondering, huh? These guys are the leaders of the Blue Dog Coalition? Yes, they are. And what they are claiming is that they're going to be these new faces representing a new wave of the Blue Dogs. They're going to take the Blue Dog Democrats into a new direction. But the fact of the matter is, their direction is nowhere close to anything. This is not really anything interesting. This isn't anything surprising or anything. And this comes out of a really worst time because this was at a time when the Blue Dog Democrats were very close to dying. So for those who don't remember, let me explain. Okay, so the Blue Dog Democrats, for those who don't know, I've talked about them a little bit before, and we've talked about them a lot, but they're basically a group of conservative Democrats who their whole job in Congress is to try and demean and lessen whatever the Democrats want to do. Now, historically, what is a conservative Democrat has sort of changed every so often. Like originally, conservative Democrat was the norm, but then soon they became an outlier, and then especially they became more of an outlier when you were thinking about socially conservative, and, well, like, basically, these guys are the most corporate of the corporate Democrats you can think of. But one of the big things that was very interesting and very notable considering the history of conservative Democrats was a lot of the Blue Dogs were very centrally focused in the South. In fact, interestingly, do you want to know where the term Blue Dog Democrat comes from? It actually comes from a term known as Yellow Dog Democrat. And the term is sort of misleading because the term Yellow Dog Democrat basically means conservative members of the Democratic Party who are too dumb to realize that the Democratic Party has not been conservative for a while, and that they would vote for a yellow dog who ran as a Democrat rather than voting for a Republican. Now, the Blue Dogs have steadily became basically a thorn in the Democrat Party's side for a while. Everybody, basically genuinely hating the Blue Dogs, and a lot of them became faces for very notable primary bids, but a lot of them also were sort of like Democrat favorites because they were in super close swing seats that really the Democrats could not lose if they wanted to retain power. So they had this weird thing of the Democrats hated them, but they also needed them, which meant that these guys could basically walk all over the Democrats and do whatever they want. But then came the BBB-BIF situation, where the Blue Dogs basically overstepped their boundaries, and now basically the entire Democratic Party, regardless of whether people need them or like them, have decided, you know what, screw you guys, we don't need you anymore. And then at the beginning of 2023, there were going to be 15 members of the caucus. Jim Costa, Mike Thompson, Sanford Bishop, Josh Gottheimer, Henry Cuellar, Vincent Gonzalez, Jared Golden, Lou Carrera, David Scott, Ed Case, Brad Schneider, Mikey Shkreli, Abigail Spanberger, and the two incoming freshmen that were going to join the Blue Dog Caucus would be Don Davis and Wiley Nickel. But then, a divide happened between the two factions within the Blue Dogs that were currently in Congress. One faction, led by Spanberger, was saying that the best course of action for the Blue Dogs would be to change their name, as the Blue Dog Democrat reputation was not only tarnished, but very outdated, as many of the members of the new Blue Dogs were not even from the South, so they had no connection to that name. Meanwhile, there were many people, led by Henry Cuellar specifically and Josh Gottheimer, who felt that the name was very intrinsic to the thing, although I also think I also have a slight funny thing about the group that wanted to change the name. They proposed the name the Common Sense Coalition, and I like to think that Josh Gottheimer, Jared Golden, and Henry Cuellar were we don't believe in common sense, so we're not going to change our name to that. So what ended up happening was Carrera, Scott, Case, Shkreli, Spanberger, and Schneider decided they would leave the caucus altogether because they really didn't feel any at home in the caucus at the moment. Don Davis and Wiley Nickel just flat out said that due to this controversy, they would refuse to join the Blue Dogs as well, and it looked like the Blue Dog Democrats were basically on their way out. But then Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Mary Peltola, I guess, came into the scene and said, we're going to revive the Blue Dogs. And I find this one especially funny considering the progressive left, including Vosh, had very heavily been Mary Peltola is this super cool progressive that we love and stand now, even though there was literally nothing about her candidacy that even remotely indicated that she was left-wing, progressive, or populist. At best, she was just another Democrat, which you could literally say that's the only reason why she would be good. But other than that, there was nothing else for her. But she has just shown she's now a conservative Democrat. And even to this day, people continue to say that, oh, look, you see, these three, they're going to make the Blue Dogs better. It's like, no, they're not. These guys are going to do the same thing that the Blue Dogs have done historically, but they're just no longer tied to the South anymore. That's literally the only difference. But anyway, speaking of corporate, like, conservative establishment type candidates and, like, groups, it seems that the House is going to be in a controversy surrounding a group that they used to be all buddy-buddy with, the NoLabels group. You see, the Problem Solvers Caucus has officially starting to, I guess, sever their ties with the group NoLabels because of the new NoLabels party. And what happened was, Brad Schneider, who was a Blue Dog that left the Blue Dogs, he was critical of the NoLabels party trying to push for their third-party option, which he views to be hurting the Democrats come November. NoLabels was then really, really mad and sent a text message to basically everybody on their email list saying that he recently attacked the notion that you should have more than two options in your 2024 presidential election, and said that he was out of step with his own party's voters, basically painting him as like a Democrat. And then, of course, all of the members of the Problem Solvers Caucus who are on the Democratic side are just kind of like, dude, what the heck, dude? They're mad at the NoLabels group, even though this is literally what the NoLabels group has basically been for its entire tenure. They really should not be surprised that this is how it's turning out. There's really not that much else to say because I just think it's funny. Let's move on to the last major story, the biggest one of the bunch. Ron DeSantis has officially announced that he will be running for president in 2024. And just like when Biden announced that he would be running, you would think that his announcement would quell everybody else from making announcements of their own, but it turns out there will be a lot more announcements moving forward. Apparently, Mike Pence and the current governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, they are expected to announce by June 7th. Apparently, Chris Christie, Will Hurd, Mike Rogers, Francis X. Suarez, Chris Sununu, and remember, Josh Bolton has stated that he was intending to run for president, but he hasn't announced yet, even though he made an announcement, but it technically didn't count as an announcement, apparently. And Rick Perry has apparently floated his name around. And that's not even getting into the potential candidates, which is weirdly enough includes Ted Cruz, even though I'm pretty sure he's currently running for his Senate seat, but maybe that's one of those seats that you can run for both offices at once. Either way, for lack of a better term, the race is essentially done because, literally this rate, let's just look at all of the current Republican presidential candidates right now so we can understand how the race is panning out. First, we have Vivek Ramsey. I still don't know why he is considered a major candidate. Asa Hutchinson, continually representing the establishment wing of the GOP, at least he's trying to. We have Larry Elder, who is also trying to make himself a bit of an outsider. We have Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, who are still trying to do that whole middle road between that. But again, for lack of a better term, the race is essentially over, and it's a Trump v. DeSantis race now, and it always was going to be this way. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't always going to be that way. I remember back in a time when people thought that these two were going to be running a ticket together. I mean, that still may be possible come down the road. Maybe that is the whole idea of maybe he tries to do the whole freaking stronger together thing right. And I'm sure many of you want me to talk about the whole oh look, he announced on Twitter and it crashed the site many times because of how packed it was and how much of a train wreck it was that he had announced it this way. But the fact of the matter is, I don't care. I literally don't care. What I care about is the fact that everybody is still trying to pretend that this is some sort of big divide within the GOP, when literally DeSantis and Trump, they are essentially the same candidate. The only difference is one just looks better or looks worse by comparison. I've seen a lot of people try to make the claim that DeSantis is the new George Wallace. I don't necessarily see it that way. I see it like this. DeSantis, Biden, and Trump are basically the Nixon, Wallace Humphrey type candidacies, not particularly in that order, depending on what I said. It is very depressing because it literally just looks like no matter what option you have, things are going to turn bad. And unfortunately, since the Democrats are so incompetent, apparently people legitimately are thinking about making things objectively worse, even though it is just objectively terrible. And like, I'm just genuinely mad, and just like seeing this race genuinely just demotivates me, because it's just like, there is nothing. Like, it's literally going to be a repeat of the 1968 election. The difference is there is no McCarthy, there is no Dick Gregory, there is no MLK Jr. floated candidacy, to which some of you will be putting in the comment section, but there is, which is a good segue to talk about the main topic of this video. And as I've said before, after this video, I am not talking about this topic anymore. The people who are super pro this are going to be enthused because the most fiercest critic will be gone. If anybody ever wants to discuss like the ideas of Marianne Williamson 2024, then by all means just send them this video if you think this video has a good enough understanding. I'll especially try to timestamp the end message, because the end message is the most important part. So let's just get into it. At this point, you should know about Marianne Williamson's 2024 presidential bid. And if you're a viewer of my channel, you should know that I am not the person who is the most gung-ho about this bid. In fact, I've levied repeated criticisms of this bid. But this video is where I think I'm going to officially make my stance clear. No ifs, ands, or buts, and no uncertain terms. I do not, nor will I ever, support Marianne Williamson's 2024 presidential bid. I do not intend to give her bid that much coverage. In fact, as I've stated, after this, no more discussions of this bid, at least until we get a dropout date or results coming in. I do not support her financially, and I would greatly urge you all to not do so. And if anybody tells you otherwise, you are being duped. I was originally thinking that I needed to wait a bit longer before I made my stance on this campaign known. You know, see how she runs her bid, see how the base is like riled up, see all this kind of stuff go forward, like actually see how this race pans out. But I think after literally just 2 months, I think I've seen enough. And I know a lot of you might say, can you say after 2 months you have seen a presidential bid to its fullest? Well, in any other circumstance, I would not say that. But in this particular circumstance, I think it is 100% justified. Now, I would like to make one thing clear. If you look on my page, if you look on my website, or whatever, not necessarily my website, but like, if you look on my YouTube channel, and whenever you can actually, I think maybe if you looked, you could find it, but I've been very critical of Marianne Williamson's 2024 bid very early on. I've tried to make this known prior to anybody even thinking of trying to push Marianne Williamson 2024. When Kyle Kulinski started floating that idea, I tried to nip it in the bud the best I could, tried to raise all of my criticisms and all of the legitimate things about her bid prior to anybody even thinking about starting fan pages or actually trying to volunteer or donate money to her. And yet people get mad at me for doing the same thing after she's already made all this kind of stuff. People think I'm trying to poo-poo this now, but it's like, no, I'm not trying to just poo-poo this now. I tried to make sure that this wasn't a thing to begin with, and I tried to raise all these issues long beforehand, but you guys didn't listen to me long beforehand. But even then, I tried to give her some form of chance. But in the short time that she has been running, I have seen nothing but reasons as to why I shouldn't be supporting her. I've seen nothing but reasons to basically prove all the things that I was saying long beforehand. Like, I saw all that kind of stuff beforehand and tried to raise these issues again long beforehand, and basically all the things I was trying to say before then was proven right. Now I guess I should just get into it. Like, here's all of the listed reasons that I have written down as to why I do not support Marianne Williamson's 2024 bid. For starters, one of the big things that many people have been trying to say is like the reason why I should back her is because they're trying to say, oh, she's the progressive option in the race. She's the most left-wing option, therefore, I need to back her. Well, for starters, that wasn't even necessarily true. Up until recently, Jerome Segal was the furthest left candidate in the race. But I wasn't going around saying, like, oh, we need to back Jerome Segal instead. Well, I did sort of do that ironically, but you get my point. Just because they're the furthest left option in the race does not necessarily mean we should give them the support. And ironically, Kshama Sawant actually stated this, like, when she was brought onto an interview to explain, like, oh, you should back Marianne Williamson. And she's like, no, that's not how we work. That's not how the system of the Socialist Alternative Party or me works. That's not how it works. We don't back the progressive Democrat and then come general election, we do whatever. No, they back socialists. And Marianne Williamson is not a socialist. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason why I don't back her. I've backed candidates who are not socialists before, and I will continue to do so because in some cases that is literally the only options you have. But usually when I do so, I usually do it like because I legitimately do believe that candidate is a good candidate, but also sometimes I do it because it's literally just for lesser evils, I guess. Like, I mean, I've backed candidates for lesser evils before. Like, during the 2020 presidential candidacy, I voted a Democrat down the ballot because, I mean, for the most part, lesser evil. But just because you're the leftier candidate does not necessarily mean you are automatically guaranteed my vote. Because let's just say leftier candidate is freaking Nazi versus esoteric Nazi. I don't necessarily know the difference between the two, but you get what I'm saying. Like, far right versus further right. You have to actually be a good candidate beforehand. And based on Marianne Williamson's electoral history, I can't really trust her, really, because she's not really the leftier-than-thou candidate that everybody keeps pitching her as. And that's one of the big things. Like, people on the internet love to pitch people as further left than they actually are. Tulsi Gabbard is one of the biggest examples I can think of. Tulsi Gabbard was painted by some people to be further left than Bernie, when that was objectively untrue. Mike Gravel had basically his entire political career whitewashed and painted to be further left than it actually was, because people wanted a leftier-than-thou candidate in that race. Richard Ojeda is another example. They painted him to be further left than he actually was on a lot of issues. Kyle Kalinske was going around saying, like, he's like this Medicare for all populist left candidate when he was literally supporting a public option in his race. And that literally leads me to the example that I'm giving right now. Marianne Williamson, in her last campaign, reneged on Medicare for all. On the debate stage, when they asked her about healthcare, she was literally saying, like, she agreed with the further right candidates in the race over Medicare for all. She's like, I see where they're coming from. But I like to say that I'm with Bernie, but I do see where these guys are coming from. And then you're going to come to me and say, like, oh, no, she is the Medicare for all candidate. She's the one we need to back. When I bring this issue to people's attention, the immediate response will be, that was 4 years ago, dude. What matters is that she's running on this issue in this cycle. Which is funny, because when Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, and a lot of the other Democrats in the 2020 field were running on Medicare for all, I remember distinctly all of you people saying that you couldn't trust them because of their historical opposition to this legislation. That's weird, but Marianne Williamson is historically opposed to this bill as well. She said so in her last campaign, when Cory Booker was even saying that he supported Medicare for all. That's weird. It's almost as if you guys hold people you like to a different standard than people you hate. I would absolutely love to see, like, if I went up to these guys and said, oh, so when Joe Biden's crime bill comes up, are you gonna go That was 29 years ago, dude. Calm down. What matters is he's running against it this cycle. No, they're not going to say that, and nor do I think they should say that, because I believe that bad policy is bad policy, and there isn't a time limit on when you can criticize them for that policy. The only thing I could say that you can use to criticize them on a specific policy is when they show consistent support for it now. And Marianne Williamson cannot be in that position because she's not an elected politician. We can't see her co-sponsor Medicare for All. We can't see her do that. We can't see her do anything that remotely resembles supporting Medicare for All in an actual sense. She can literally say whatever the heck she wants, and it doesn't matter. We don't know what she thinks behind the scenes. These are the same people that will tell you, don't trust the Medicare for All co-sponsor list, because a lot of these people don't publicly support Medicare for All and are only doing it for this bill. And then are going to say, take Marianne Williamson for her word. She supports Medicare for All 100%. Ignore the fact that she openly said that she didn't in the last cycle. In fact, some people even choose to flat out not attempt to hide the fact that she is not leftier than thou. One article that was made to support Marianne Williamson flat out called her a mix of Bernie Sanders and Jordan Peterson. To which I hear the Marianne Williamson people go, they said early Jordan Peterson. We're not talking about Jordan Peterson as he is now. To which I say, there is no early Jordan Peterson or late Jordan Peterson. There's just Jordan Peterson. The same Jordan Peterson that we all know now is the exact same Jordan Peterson who has been saying all this stuff in 1993, is the same Jordan Peterson that was saying all this stuff in 2016. The far-right fundamentalist Christian that Jordan Peterson is today is the same man he was in his early stages. The thing they're trying to do is they're trying to say that Jordan Peterson's like his self-help book of that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say oh, Marianne Williamson was the self-help guru, so was Jordan Peterson. But it's that's not even how Jordan Peterson became popular. Jordan Peterson became popular because of transphobia. And this is the person you're going to compare the torchbearer for the left to in this cycle. Really, really odd comparison, especially considering trans rights are the thing that are on the line in the next election. But of course, one of the biggest things that I and many other people have been talking about with the Marianne Williamson bid to show that she is not leftier than thou is one big issue: vaccines. Marianne Williamson has had a lot of historical issues about vaccinations, typically ones that even make her look a lot like her rival, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is the first one I'm going to get into the rebuttal first. One of the biggest rebuttals whenever I bring up Marianne Williamson and the vaccine issues is this. People will frequently say that was one quote 10 years ago that she responded to which I say, no it isn't. She said in her 1992 book, sickness is an illusion and does not actually exist. She has called depression a scam. She said in 2011, quote, I understand the controversial aspects about vaccinations, and I share many of the concerns. She invited an anti-vaccine author, Kim Olsen, on her radio show in 2012, and when Olsen made the claim that there was a link between vaccines and autism, Marianne Williamson responded, quote, yes, absolutely, and I know that one too, and I have a friend who had the same experience, so I know it's huge, and I think all I'm calling for in this program is for everybody to be awake and really do your due diligence and do your own research. She said on Bill Maher's show in 2015, skepticism is actually healthy on the issues of vaccinations. She got called a spiritual legend by Gwyneth Paltrow in 2018, who literally peddles snake oil to anti-vaxxers and has anti-vaxxers on her payroll. I'm not kidding. Literally, Gwyneth Paltrow, the fucking woman who dated Tony Stark, she literally peddles snake oil to people. During the COVID-19 pandemic, one of her people literally said that her face cream and self-help books could cure COVID. And in 2019, she called vaccine mandates Orwellian. She said this during a campaign tour, literally while COVID was starting to happen. She's been frequently a guest on Russell Brand's show, who is also a well-known anti-vaxxer and far-right person. So yeah, definitely seems to be a lot more than just one time 10 years ago. The closest thing to an actual rebut is she's changed, to which I say, based on all that stuff, no, she hasn't. The fact that she has said some really suspect things about vaccinations as late as 2019 shows that she did not change. The only thing that changed was that these things were now becoming a detriment to her. You see, when you're being a self-help guru, the whole point of being a self-help guru is to sell people bullshit. That's literally the whole point of being a self-help guru. You have to either tell people things that are extremely obvious, like, oh, in order to be healthy, you need to eat vegetables and go on an hour walk every day. Or you need to pick up a dandelion off the ground, blow it in someone's face, and then go, due to this, your brain tumor will go away. That'll be $700. They are literally the worst aspects of the medical system because they have people fork over thousands of dollars. But the only difference is with the actual medical system, they give you things that help you, but the self-help gurus give you literally nothing. Now, I know what a lot of you are going to be saying, but look at the actual platform she's running on. She's running as the true FDR candidate. She's running on the second Bill of Rights. She has freaking Harvey K as one of her supporters, who's like a hardcore like lefty philosopher or whatever. This shows that she's very serious about her bid. Look, it doesn't matter how serious her bid is. It's not working. The fact of the matter is, this isn't gonna work. This literally will not work. And I know a lot of you are going to say this. That oh no, you see, it could work. No, it's not going to work. Let me show you. I have included a list of literally every single time an incumbent president of either party was challenged for their nomination. Every single time that this has happened. This has happened a grand total of 17 times in the history of U.S. primaries. 1924, the challengers to the incumbent president got a combined total of 30.9%. 1932, they got a combined total of 60.2%. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Those two were Republican presidencies. 1936, we got 7.1%. 1940, 28.07. And 1944, 20.8. 1948, 36.1. Those were all Democratic presidencies. The first three were FDR. 1956, 14.07%. 1964, 12.3%. 1968 is the most interesting one of the endeavors because the combined total of the opposition candidates was 94.9%. That's because LBJ withdrew his primary bid after New Hampshire. Now, so far, you might think, oh, well, see, this shows that this is actually a very viable option. Well, I should also mention this. Before then, the primary process had absolutely no bearing at any point whatsoever on how the presidential candidates got nominated. The primaries were more of a popularity contest. After 1972, that's when they actually became needed for the presidency. Well, needed, quote unquote. We'll get to that in a second. 1972, 13.1% Republican. 1980, 48.9% Democrat. 1984, 1.22% Republican. 1992, 27.16% Republican. 1996, 11% Democrat. 2000, 1.9% Republican. 2012, 11.1% Democrat. 2020, 6.01% Republican. You may notice that number is actually trending downwards for the most part, especially on the Democratic side. The reason why the number is trending downward is simply because the primaries are more notable in how the actual president gets chosen, and as such, people are actually looking towards how that is chosen to be viable. When things are at stake and things push come to shove, people will probably be a lot more strategic in how they go with things. For example, in like most actual presidential primaries, what actually happens is that a lot of people will probably vote for the candidate they kind of agree with the most. Like, let's say, hypothetically, we'll go back to 2004. There's a good chance that there were a lot of people who wanted to vote for Dennis Kucinich, who loved Dennis Kucinich, that probably ended up voting for Howard Dean because they're like, Howard Dean is the candidate that we see as the frontrunner on this particular issue. And then maybe we had people in the 2008 election that were more in line of like, they wanted to vote for Kucinich or Gravel, but they were like, those two are basically not going to get any traction. So the best option for me is to vote for the furthest left of the actual candidacies. And if you remember, the actual candidacies that people considered like serious were Obama, Hillary, John Edwards, and Joe Biden. Those were the ones that people actually considered as serious contenders for the race. So most people who were considered of the left-wing field went to John Edwards. In fact, even Ralph Nader publicly supported John Edwards before he ended up running for the presidency himself in that same election. And it was purely due to the fact that John Edwards was the only one of those four that publicly stated that he was in favor of a universal healthcare system. People are a lot more strategic in their voting nowadays, and I mean, in this kind of race, the most strategic route for you to go is the incumbent in your party. That's why the incumbent usually wins by such a large margin, because most people just want the incumbent to have the advantage of incumbency and then move forward. Especially nowadays, like Democrats have basically stated they don't want to go through a lot of the sort of jibber jabber in regards to how the actual primary process is. What they want is just a clear path to try and beat the GOP. That's what they want. That's why they try to stack the races in favor of their preferred candidates in the primaries, and why a lot of the Democratic candidates in the most recent cycles are trying to announce so early on. They want the advantage of people looking at them and going, that's the candidate, that's the one we want, we just want a clear path to the nomination. Like, they said this openly in 2020. Like, they had people in the Democratic field that were literally just like, okay, Bernie won the first 3 states, and then he won South Carolina. Okay, race over, Biden won, whatever. They wanted just a straightforward, no holds barred. They didn't want to go through any sort of primary process. They just wanted a clear path to beating Trump. That's what they wanted, and that's what they want for this cycle. They just want to endorse Joe Biden, have Joe Biden be their nominee moving forward, and just be done with it. They don't want to go through Marianne Williamson. They don't want to go through RFK Jr. They don't want to go through Bernie. They don't want to go through any of the other candidates. They don't want to do that. The GOP blatantly said the same thing in the last cycle, but again, they said it very blatantly. They were just like, no, we're just not going to do that. The Democrats are going to still hold primaries and stuff, but they're also just making it very abundantly clear they don't really care. In 2020, the GOP just flat out canceled primaries. DNC, I doubt that they will be canceling primaries, but a lot of state parties have just openly stated that they endorse Joe Biden, meaning that their party's primaries are kind of meaningless when it's pretty abundantly clear they're just going to be sending their delegates to go vote for Joe Biden. This is not new information. Nobody should be surprised, and yet people are still going to be sticking around for that part. I went on that sort of rant. I kind of forgot where the point was leading to, so I'll just move on to the next thing. Marianne Williamson 2024 is basically just a distraction. And it's not just this. Like, it is this, but it's also something more than this. What Marianne Williamson 2024 is people want to have some sort of cause or something to bide their time. They want a distraction to focus on. But the problem is, this is not only something that is just something to pay attention to, but this is something that is taking away energy from other things that they could be focusing on instead. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the lead up to this bid, with how Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske had been treating this bid. Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski, they're the reasons why this bid is even being taken seriously. These two are the ones who were making this bid very well known. I got into an argument with some person. I was like, no. I only heard this from Vosh. It's like, no. Vosh heard it from them. They were the ones who spread Marianne Williamson 2024. Kyle Kulinski was the person who was pushing hard for Marianne Williamson 2024. And it was through this sort of thing with him and Kyle talking to each other that caused Vosh to even think about this as well. You see, when Vosh talked about it, he was literally just like, I heard Marianne Williamson was thinking about running for president in 2024. That wasn't true. At the time, Kyle Kulinski was just floating her name out. Literally, every time he was just saying, he would literally just say that he was floating Marianne Williamson for 2024. They're the sole reasons why this race, why Marianne Williamson's bid exists to begin with. And they are doing this because, again, they just want like a thing. They want a cause. They want something that they can put their name to. Like, we're the ones who did this. But the problem is, all the time they spent building up Marianne Williamson 2024 was time that they could have been spending building up literally anything else. Literally anything else. These guys were floating Marianne Williamson 2024 at the beginning of 2022. The time that I was saying that we shouldn't be focusing on 2024 because we have very viable races that we need to focus on and win now. Meanwhile, two of the largest names in the quote-unquote left-wing politics sphere were spending their time focusing on a presidential bid that is doomed to fail to begin with. And they had so much time and energy that they could have been focusing on things that were very much in the same ilk of what they want to do, but they chose to, again, focus their attention on nothing. Like, the biggest one is a lot of candidacies that they basically snubbed in favor of pushing for Marianne Williamson 2024. Josh Riley in New York District 19 was very much a candidate in the style of Crystal and Kyle. A seat in Kyle's home state, I think it was in his neighboring district. Like, because he said that he was in Mondaire Jones's district, but Mondaire Jones was drawn in, his district is currently Sean Patrick Maloney's district, and, I don't know necessarily how this, redraw affected Kyle, but he was basically in this area. That was literally in a congressional candidates in this area that he lives in. That was literally one of the closest races in the cycle. In fact, literally, that race had a special election right before that had a Democrat win. And then, when the actual election happened, Josh Riley barely lost the bid. And when I say barely, I mean literally barely lost. Again, it was one of the closest races in the nation. Do you know how much coverage Kyle put in that race alone? None. Crystal Ball? Even less. Probably less again. Lucas Coons was a very populist candidate, again, very much in their same style and vein of politics. Basically, no coverage from either of them. And the biggest one that I'm pretty sure a lot of you might be really mad about when I say, Mandela Barnes. Mandela Barnes was a progressive running in literally the closest Senate race of the cycle. I think it was this race that was the closest one. It was really a very slim margin that Mandela Barnes lost in. Kyle Kulinski literally made one video on Mandela Barnes a mere 21 days before the election. And the video in question was literally just, hey, look at this short clip from a debate from this candidate. Look, Ron Johnson is a pretty bad candidate. This guy running, Mandela Barnes, it'd be cool if he won. And it's like, Mandela Barnes was literally one of the most progressive and the closest candidate in the race. I don't understand why they didn't focus any of their attention on this race. This race in particular, that race literally was pretty much one of the make or break candidacies. And the most we got was a tepid endorsement. When, the reason why we focused a lot on John Fetterman was because Fetterman was an open seat, so it looked like there was much more to lose. And in retrospect, yeah, like, Johnson did have a bit of an advantage, but that advantage shrank very much. Again, like, literally, it was one of the closest races of the cycle. It could have flipped, and we would have gotten a great senator out of it. But no, instead, we had to focus on Marianne Williamson 2024. I've gotten into arguments again where people say, no, you see, I don't say that we need to focus on this over races otherwise. I would greatly like to ask, do you know who's running in your upcoming elections? Genuinely, do any of you, Marianne Williamson 2024 people, know of any candidate running on the ballot in your House race, in your Senate race, in your governor's race, lieutenant governor, state house, state senate, whatever? Do you know any of your candidates in those races? Like, genuinely, do you know any of them? And don't just cheat, say the incumbent's name. Genuinely, do you know any of the people who you would actually be legitimately interested in voting for or canvassing or any work into making sure that they could win the upcoming election? Do you even know how close your races are? And if you have races that are very, very close, why are you not organizing efforts surrounding those races? Why are you organizing your efforts on Marianne Williamson? You do know that a lot of you, statistically, a lot of you are either in a Democrat seat that might flip, or are in a flippable, winnable Republican seat, and you just don't know it. And while you spend all of your effort on Marianne Williamson's bid, you are snubbing a candidate that very much needs your support right now, that I'm pretty sure maybe you could organize just an online, like, Facebook group or an online Twitter thing where you could just get a voter drive going or anything of the sort. You're not doing any of that. Instead, you want to focus on a hashtag Marianne Williamson 2024. You're going to focus all your attention on a candidate whose highest polling is 11%. But at this same time in the race, Bernie Sanders, he was polling at 10%. No, he wasn't. Bernie Sanders was consistently polling in the mid-teens during this cycle. And very different, considering Bernie Sanders is an incumbent senator who was running against the former First Lady and former Secretary of State, who he had nowhere to go but, like, up and actually viable. Meanwhile, Marianne Williamson is a nobody who is running against the literal President of the United States. The next reason is that the people who are pushing the hardest for Marianne Williamson 2024 do not have a track record at picking winnable candidates or having actual good, viable electoral work. Kyle Kulinski is best known for founding a political organization that did not become successful until he was no longer affiliated with that organization. Crystal Ball is well known for taking $174,000 from her own political action committee to line her own pocket. And the biggest thing to show that these guys have basically no understanding on electoral politics, aside from basically every single piece of their political commentary, is the fact that they were basically the sole reason as to why Richard Ojeda ran for president in 2020. These two hyped up Ojeda so much, flat out lied about his record, saying that he was pro-Medicare for all when he wasn't, saying that he was this rural Bernie-type candidate when there was basically no evidence to indicate that he was Bernie Sanders' supporter until he just said, oh yeah, I support Bernie. But it's like, really? You could just say that about anything? Crystal Ball was legitimately going around saying, like, he's the next step for, like, the progressive movement, ignoring the fact that her political action committee was actually endorsing against the progressive candidate endorsed by Marianne Williamson. Interesting. But Crystal Ball literally hyped Richard Ojeda so much that 3 days after he lost a House race that he was, to be fair, destined to lose, doing pretty good for a candidate in that race, to be fair, but he was kind of destined to lose that race. Literally, she hyped him up so much that 3 days after he'd made that massive loss, he was somehow thoroughly convinced that there was this massive political movement that would carry him from a state senate seat to the freaking White House, deciding to resign from that seat, which would then be filled by a coal lobbyist, and then would run for president for a grand total of 75 days because literally nobody was paying attention to him. Not to be fair to Marianne Williamson, at this point we're past 75 days, So technically, she's doing better than he is. But I really don't think that she's going to be doing that well moving forward, especially considering her campaign doesn't look like it's doing so hot. Apparently, their biggest focus is pushing to get Marianne Williamson to win big in New Hampshire, and then due to this, apparently, Joe Biden will then resign from the presidency or whatever, and then Marianne Williamson will become the next Democratic presidential candidate. Even though that basically makes no sense, especially considering the Democrats literally just changed it so that New Hampshire isn't even the first primary anymore, so really her winning basically means nothing. I also don't think she will win the New Hampshire primary. There's basically nothing to indicate that she would win. I know people will point out like, oh, Joe Biden isn't popular among Democrats. Yeah, but they're also going to suck it up. Next major reason, Marianne's election is basically another example of leftist brain rot. You see, online lefties apparently have the attention span of goldfish. They can't remember anything to save their own life, and it usually has to do with some form of hypocrisy. Here are some examples. In reference to a lot of conservatives openly saying that they should take away guns from trans people, lefties will usually respond with, you say that you support the Second Amendment, yet when a minority group does it, all of a sudden you want gun control. Even though this has happened a million times beforehand, most prominently with the Black Panthers, you say that you are anti-grooming, and yet you support church and child marriage laws. When, again, conservatives have not really made it abundantly, they've never been opposed to those things, and they know what they're doing. I don't understand why you're bringing this up. This has just been a thing that conservatives have stood for a while. A lot of those child marriage laws are literally on the books because of conservatives, and they won't remove it for the sake of tradition. But then you'll think, oh, I got them now. And one thing that I don't want to necessarily name drop them, but I guess I will. I don't really care. The Surfs did this thing where it's like Tim Pool, he was called out because he said that he quote unquote admitted that they don't care about the LGBTQ actually having sexual problems with the children. Their whole thing is that they think that the LGBTQ lifestyle itself is inherently grooming. Lance from the Surfs tried to do this thing where he's like, lol, I got you now. I proved that this is just the big thing. And then Tim Pool literally responded with, that's been my position since day one. That's been abundantly clear. And it's like, yeah, no duh. That's always been their position. I don't understand why you're acting so surprised and you're acting like you did a gotcha. This has been a thing for a while. Why do you guys have the attention span of literal worms? But the biggest one relevant to this is in regards to electoral things. Oh, you guys, Democrats, claim that you support democracy and that democracy's on the ballot, and yet you're going to spend all of your time silencing Marianne and making sure that she's not available as an option, as a serious contender for president. How very undemocratic of you. No duh. This has literally always been the position of the Democrats and the Republicans. Democratic Party specifically. Shirley Chisholm, Jesse Jackson, Dennis Kucinich, twice, Mike Gravel, John Wolfe Jr., Larry Lessig, Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Gravel a second time, Bernie Sanders a second time, Larry Agron, Eugene McCarthy, Tom Harkin. As I said before with the RNC, they literally canceled primaries because they just wanted to give Trump the nomination for their party. They do this all the time. Why are you acting so shocked about them doing this again? And another thing, this is another example. Democrats historically try to kick Green Party candidates off the ballot to make sure that they actually can win, so that there's no issue of alleged spoiler effect. No doubt, this has always been the position. Why are you guys so surprised? Genuinely, why are you guys so surprised at this thing that is common knowledge? And I'll tell you why. They want to feign outrage just so they can get clicks, views, or whatever. So they can get retweets, whatever the heck they want. They either already know and they're just lying, or they're genuinely ill-informed and know nothing and we shouldn't take them seriously as pundits. Why do you think when people were speculating on potential anti-Joe Biden candidates for 2024, people were suggesting Bernie Sanders run for a third time, or suggesting AOC run for president? because those two are so big, you can't silence them. But no, you chose Marianne, a candidate that is very easy to silence. And I know, like, this is sort of, like, off track, because I didn't mention this back when this was part of the subject, but, like, one thing people might say is, like, oh, by your logic, if we shouldn't support someone who has no chance of winning, then we shouldn't have supported Bernie Sanders in 2016. Well, no, that doesn't work that way, because I legitimately thought Bernie Sanders could win in 2016. That was when I was getting involved and first getting interested in politics, so I legitimately thought that he had a chance of winning. I had that much faith in his vision that I legitimately thought that he had a chance of winning. Even as the numbers were dwindling, I was still thinking he had a chance, he had a chance, he had a chance. I didn't concede until the convention. And now I'm going to hear you guys might say, oh, but didn't you support the Green Party candidates? And yet now you're going to make the claim that we shouldn't support a candidate if they don't have a chance of winning? Supporting the Green Party is vastly different than supporting the Democrats. If you're joining the Democratic Party and you're voting for candidates in the Democratic Party, then at that point you really are supposed to be trying to win. Like, if that's the route you're going in, that is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be trying to win. When you go to the Greens, you've essentially given up. Yeah, you could say you supported a good issue, or you can just say, yeah, legitimately you just wanted to vote like a clean conscience. As Debs once said, I'd rather vote for something I want and not get it than vote for something I don't want and get it. And that was my analysis in regards to voting for the Green Party. They were candidates that I legitimately looked at, I legitimately liked them, and legitimately thought that they were good choices. I don't feel that way about Marianne. I have no shame and no regrets for voting for Howie Hawkins in the 2020 election. And I have no shame and no regrets in voting for Matthew Ho for Senate. I legitimately liked their candidacies. I legitimately believed in the things they were saying. I legitimately thought that those two were well put together and well-liked candidates. They believed in what they believed in. They were true believers. They legitimately were good candidates. I cannot say that in good faith about Marianne Williamson, especially considering Marianne Williamson has sort of become a weird representation of, it's really weird to say this and weird to describe it, an upper class in YouTube politics. Because, and this is where I'm going to have to delve into a subject I really do not care about, the big left-wing creators having cliques and infighting with each other. Legitimately, I don't care. Like, I've been seeing a lot of tweets in my, like, feed or in my For You tab where it's, like, leftist creators infighting, but it's like, guys, I legitimately don't care. I thought about briefly of making, like, a chart where I'm like, these are all the different online left-wing cliques, but it's like, I legitimately don't care. Like, I don't care if Secular Talk hates Jimmy Dore, and if Jimmy Dore hates Xander Hall, and if Xander Hall hates Brianna Joy Gray, and if they hate, like, I don't care if these guys are fighting with each other. That means nothing to me. These guys are nothing to me. I don't care if one of the leftist mafia people are, like, a freaking, like, dumb person, because, like, I don't care about the leftist mafia. Like, I mean, legitimately, I'm kind of getting sick and tired of left-wing creators. I'm almost on the brink of just unsubbing them all. I don't care about them anymore. Especially as I've seen how this, like, system works. Like, I've seen this system and how it just takes every, like, positive actual attribute that you can have out of any of these shows and figures and just rips it out of them. How the only way that these people can, like, stay afloat is if they, like, fucking cannibalize each other like animals. Like, I'm just legitimately getting sick and tired of it. And ironically, the Marianne Williamson bid kind of has shown me just that. Like, people who were legitimately, like, super anti-Marianne Williamson, not for any of the reasons that I've said before, but because they perceive her as this representation of a specific subsection of YouTube politics. Basically, like, I've seen a lot of drama around this, and a lot of people, like, clowning on certain people, but let me explain. So, Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske have been in a relationship for a while, not just a show relationship, but an actual relationship, and they recently just got married. And, interestingly, a lot of their podcaster friends were invited. Brianna Joy Gray, The Vanguard, Katie Halper, Shoe on Head, you know, a bunch of the other, like, usual suspects. And who was invited to officiate Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinste's wedding? Marianne Williamson. And I know if certain people see me say this, they're going to be like, oh, lol, he's joining with the Revolutionary Clown Network. I don't care about your clique either. I legitimately don't care about any of you. I don't care about, like, Kyle. I don't care about Jeff. I don't care about, like, all these. I don't care about any of these people. All these cliques and infighting on Twitter or, like, YouTube mean nothing to me. I don't care if you guys are going to call me, like, a shill for whatever clique you hate the most. I don't like any of your cliques. I don't like any of you. None of you like me, so I'm just returning the favor of not liking you back. But back to this wedding specifically, like, again, I know people are going to clown on it for, like, just like, oh, you're going to bring up the wedding, but, like, think about it logistically. Marianne Williamson is officiating a wedding of the people who are pushing for her to run for president, and then all the invited guests are people who also benefit from the Marianne Williamson 2024 candidacy because they're going to keep inviting her on the shows, they're going to keep pushing for the hashtags, they're going to keep pushing for the clicks, and everybody mutually benefits from this arrangement. Doesn't this look a little bit suspect to you? I've seen a lot of people refer to this as access journalism, and yeah, that's true. Do you think Marianne Williamson is going to get any flack from any of the people at that wedding? No. She's going to get praise from every single one of them. When she goes on their shows, they're going to give her softball questions. They're going to benefit mutually from the clicks. They're going to spread the Marianne Williamson donation link. Marianne Williamson is going to spread their patrons. This is basically the same thing as if Hillary Clinton is being invited to like a CNN anchor's wedding. And that's just sad because it's like, wasn't the independent media supposed to be different? Wasn't the indie media supposed to be legitimately different? But just like mainstream media, it's a big club and you're not in it. Where Revolutionary Blackout Network gets it wrong is because they call it a Bernie industrial complex, which is flat out untrue considering every single person at that wedding hates Bernie. They claim they don't, but they do. They hate Bernie almost as much as the Revolutionary Blackout Network does, but the fact of the matter is, they just do it differently. And all of those reasons compounding can literally just be summed up with one simple reason. Marianne Williamson is the new Force the Vote. Marianne Williamson is the new Tulsi Gabbard. Marianne Williamson is the new Jill Stein. Marianne Williamson is the new Ralph Nader. Marianne Williamson is the new Dennis Kucinich. Marianne Williamson is the new Julian Assange. What do I mean by that? Marianne Williamson is now a litmus test that has no bearing on actual policies, but rather something to just make people feel better. Literally, because that is what all of those people that I have listed and things that I've listed are. That's what all of the stuff that I've said is. They were not something that was actually like a viable thing. They were not something that was actually like going to win the presidency. They weren't something that was going to win like a vote in the House. They weren't anything that was going to be viable. Like, Trump was not going to pardon Assange because he was the one who was trying to charge Assange to begin with. Ralph Nader wasn't going to magically surpass Al Gore and George Bush as the next presidential candidate. Jill Stein was not going to be the torchbearer for the Bernie movement. Tulsi Gabbard was not the next step for the Bernie campaign. But what they were was a litmus test that people could then turn around and claim, oh, only real lefties would support these guys, but if you don't, then you're a hypocrite, you're a fraud. If you criticize any of these things, you're bad. And that's what all of these things turned into. They all turned into small little cults. Tulsi, Assange, Force the Vote specifically. If you levied any criticism towards them, even if it was supposed to be constructive criticism, it would be immediately downplayed and bashed. Like if you were to say, oh, well, you see, Bernie Sanders not actually saying Julian Assange's name when he says that we should support press freedom, that's not really a big deal. And then they'll go, oh, so you support Julian Assange going to jail for the rest of his life? When you would go, I find it odd that Tulsi Gabbard has these weird relations with Bashar al-Assad and Narendra Modi. I don't necessarily think we can trust a person on foreign policy if they're going to treat these two people in somewhat high regards. All of a sudden you get, oh, so you think we should nuke Syria? What? When you went, I don't really think how force the vote really would work. It doesn't really fit with how the actual system of picking a speaker would go, and I don't really understand if the whole point is that there is no chance for McCarthy to become speaker, then I legitimately do not understand what the actual threat is. They go, oh, so all of a sudden you don't like Medicare for all anymore? That's weird. None of those things, like if you supported any of those things, you are not leftier than thou. You literally are not. None of those things at all had a bearing on your left-wing status. In fact, some of those things, especially the Tulsi thing, might have made you look more right-wing in actuality. Just because you don't support Marianne Williamson does not mean that you are not a true leftist. And that's not how it's going to be, and that's not how it ever will be. If you really don't want it to become any of those things, then I would highly suggest you guys change your strategy up to this point, because that is literally all I have been getting. Whenever I bring up any slight criticism of Marianne Williamson, I get the exact same stuff that I said when I criticized Force the Vote. I got the exact same stuff that I said when I criticized Tulsi Gabbard. I got the exact same stuff I said when I criticized the Assange cult. This is literally beat for beat what happened. It's like people's brains suddenly turned off when you even remotely criticize the thing that they support. And that's one of the big things that's a big problem with like people in general. Whenever you criticize anything relating to something, like when you criticize a political position or when you criticize a religion or whatever, people perceive it as a personal attack. When it's like, literally, I'm just criticizing this one thing in general. Like, you have no bearing on this. You literally don't have any bearing on my pro or anti-Marianne Williamson stance. Much like how the people who supported Force the Vote had no bearing on my actual position on Force the Vote. What was the problem was the Force the Vote itself. That was the issue I had. And similarly, I get attacked on a weirdly personal level for some reason, just because of my position on a particular issue. And when I say an issue, I of course mean a meaningless hashtag. This has no bearing on the outside world. Nobody outside of Twitter cares about Marianne Williamson 2024. They don't know who she is. They'll never know who she is. And at most, they'll be like, oh, wasn't she like that crazy lady in that one debate? That's sort of funny. There are more people who know that Joe Exotic is running for president another time than Marianne Williamson. And they will be treated basically the exact same in regards to the actual election. And I guess I'll just say this so that we can save face. Am I saying under no circumstance should you vote for Marianne Williamson 2024? No. But you have to acknowledge certain things. Like, if you come to me and just admit to me, look, I know Marianne Williamson's not going to win. I know that she's not really going to push Joe Biden left, because that's another thing I didn't get into. She's not going to push Joe Biden left. That's not a thing that's going to happen. I didn't think that was going to happen with the Bernie Biden, talks. I didn't think that was going to happen regardless. That's not going to happen. Joe Biden's not going to get pushed left. If you were to say, look, I know that none of that stuff is going to happen, and I know that I'm not really going to be, posting, hashtag Marianne Williamson 2024 that much. I'm not going to be focusing too much attention on this, candidacy, but I am still going to vote for Marianne Williamson when the ballot comes in for my primary. By all means, go ahead. I don't really care. I don't vote shame under certain circumstances. I mean, if you vote for, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or DeSantis or Trump, by all means, I'll shame you however I want. And I'll even say, if I do even bother voting in the primary, I'll probably vote for Marianne just for the sake of just voting for somebody who isn't Joe Biden, for that feel-good feeling. But that's only if there is a primary ballot that is worth voting for. Marianne Williamson ain't gonna be the turnout because she's not winning at any point of the game, so there's really no point in me voting for the ballot specifically for her. I would have to look into down the ballot races and see if that's the case. Maybe that's the only reason why. Maybe there's an actual good candidate in your area, and you're oh, just since I'm here, I might as well vote for Marianne Williamson. It's fine, by all means, go ahead. But don't trick yourself into thinking that this is an actual viable candidacy when it isn't. Because I'll just say one thing very bluntly clear for everybody to understand. It's sad to say, but it is 100% true. There is not going to be a single candidate on the 2024 election cycle that speaks for the left that has an actual viable chance of winning. No Bernie, no Stein, no Nader, no whoever. We don't have an actual viable candidate to challenge Joe Biden in the primary, and there will be no actual viable left-wing option for the general election. There is literally no word out of the Green Party thus far, and any word that would come out of them would probably be bad considering their poor showing in 2020, and as such, the left should not pay that much attention to the 2024 presidential race in regards to like voting and stuff. Looking into the polls, looking into the data, that's one thing, but fret not. I'm not being doomeristic. I'm just saying that as a legitimate fact, so you understand. The best course of action for the left in 2024 is to push for progressive candidates in the House and Senate elections. Lucas Coons is running in Missouri, and this is a seat that used to be blue, so there is a chance that this could flip, and he's a legitimately good candidate. It's a bit of a long shot, but it's a chance, especially considering in the Senate, there is a lot of speculation that the Republicans will take the Senate because of Joe Manchin. So at the very least, we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. But unfortunately, Manchin has just kind of failed. So we need to start looking into other options. And any and all open blue seats that are available, look into them, find a viable candidate. You can tell me them in the comment section if you know of any. I'm starting to try and look into them so I can make sure that other people know of these viable progressive candidates in these very blue seats, and maybe look into some flippable seats and see if we can get some like progressives in those areas as well. Hopefully, we can build enough of a profile to mount a viable presidential bid come 2028. Maybe we'll be able to officially start that DSA party by then. Also, make sure that 2028 is a year that we'll be able to get to, and not one that is ruined by climate change. And this is one that is definitely going to irk some people in my audience. It might be a happy thing for some of my audience and a sad day for other people in my audience. But one of the biggest things that the left needs to do for 2024, and I just have to say it, make sure that the GOP loses. The presidency and the governorships are the top priorities. Senate and the House might be a bit more complicated, but basically as long as it's like a workable like majority minority situation, then hopefully we can make sure that things work. But number one priority is to make sure that whoever the GOP nominee is in 2024, that they lose. I'm not officially saying one thing. I'm taking the Jean-Luc Mélenchon route and saying first, second, and third priority is to make sure that they do not take the presidency. Make sure your state doesn't fall down the same path that Florida took. And again, make sure that the GOP loses in 2024. Again, I am taking the Jean-Luc Mélenchon route and not saying specific words, because I've made it a point to not say specific words. But I think the point stands that if I have to say stuff like that, you should know that the situation is that dire. Whatever you did in the last cycles, that means nothing. Whatever you do for future cycles, that means nothing. But this is legitimately the one where you gotta... You hear me struggling to say those words. You hear me struggling. So you know, you've pretty much, you all know what I'm implying. You all know what I'm saying. And hopefully, we'll be able to move forward and not be able to have to do this kind of option again. I'm hoping that this is the last option. This is the last time that we have to do things like this. At the very least, this will probably be the last time I do something like this. At least I hope. We'll have to wait and see how future elections pan out, but I would like to hope that is the case. Hoping for a better tomorrow is the only thing that keeps people going in the today. So yeah, with all that out of the way, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified if a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.